this is another Collector Haven review, and today we're reviewing Dial H. It was written by China Miéville, I hope I'm getting that right, and the artist was Métis Saint-Colorco. That was really wrong, by the way. Anyway, Dial H was originally made in 1966. That's the first time it was made. A guy named Robbie Reed, he was a teenager. He found an old telephone dial in a cave, and randomly he could read out the characters that were on it, and he dialed hero by accident, and all of a sudden he would turn into a new superhero every time. In certain instances he would turn into a hero that already exists, like Plastic Man, but I don't know, that's just kind of some weird backstory. It was revamped for a second time, and it came out in 1981 in Legion of Superheroes, number 272. If you're really that nerdy and you really want to find it, then you can find it there, except it was changed to where it was a boy and a girl, and they had the dial powers, except it was changed into a watch and a necklace that had HERO, and so they didn't really have to dial in an old telephone thing. And it only worked for an hour, so they could only be a superhero for an hour, so the time constraint kind of held them back from saving the world from giant monsters for a long time. Anyway, it was revamped for a third time in 2003. This comic has failed a lot, so just trying to give you some feedback. 2003, and except it was revamped as HERO. That's it, just hero. And it would be stories about normal people finding the dial, turning into superheroes and getting scared, and they wouldn't be able to control the powers, so it was kind of just, they took the comic in a direction to where normal people would find the power of superheroes, and they'd realize that being a superhero, it takes a lot of responsibility. So in the 2003 series, Robbie Reed, the original Robbie Reed, is an old man, and he's really bitter about losing the power. So what he does is he actually tries to find the dial somewhere in the city, and a serial killer is also trying to find the dial. So what Robbie Reed does is he fights the serial killer, trying to keep him away from the dial. And pretty much at the end of the series, the dial gets blasted back in time to 50,000 BC. So it's one of those stories. Anyway, it's revamped in 2012 now, Dial H. Six comics got canceled. Dial H is one of the comics that are coming in to replace. This isn't even replacing anything, really. It's not even replacing any of the storylines. It's just an old comic that they brought back, and they're bringing it back now. Okay, story starts off. Nelson, a guy named Nelson, he happens to be obese, and his friend is trying to convince him to lose weight. He's smoking so many cigarettes, he's got a lot of addictions, food, blah blah blah. He's not really taking care of himself. So Nelson finds his friend being beat up by a mob of random people. He runs away from the mob because the mob's like, oh, it's a bunch of gangsters. They find him, and he runs away, and he runs into an old telephone booth, and he gets scared, and so he's trying to dial 911, but he's too afraid and he's too scared, and so he accidentally dials a random number, and then he turns into a superhero, and he beats them all up, and he gets his friend to the hospital. Now the way that they convey this comic is kind of weird, because they do normal body, body structure, the guy's obese, but at the same time, the artist who is doing all of this isn't afraid to have his art look, somewhat ugly and distorted. It's just the way the story works. And the first superhero that Nelson becomes is like a guy with a top hat, and he's made of smoke, and he has like smoke powers, but the way that it's conveyed is a scratchy kind of like a horror type comic, something that you would find in a horror type comic.
It's okay, you can cut that.
The art style is something that you might see in a horror type comic more than a regular type comic. And this comic right here is not really for people who are looking for superheroes and tights and things like that, because it's more of, it brings an aspect of, I can read this comic, and usually people judge comics as like, oh, it's just, what kids read, but it's actually something that is a piece of literature that I think is a pretty good read, comparing it to things like Spawn and other. So at the end of the comic, he realizes that he needs to go back to this dial because it turned him into a superhero. That's freaking crazy. So he goes back and he's typing in the letters again, and he realizes that he types the word "if so," and he turns into another superhero, and that superhero happens to go find the boss who is controlling all the gangsters and says, "Don't go after my friend, you douche." He doesn't say it like that, but he comes back and he goes back to the dial and he realizes that "if so" spells something else. It spells HERO, hero. Now that's his powers. It's just a normal guy getting powers. So it's a good read. I think it's pretty good. I can't really completely review the series because this is the first comic. So this is kind of like a first look at Dial H. I'm glad you were here with us, and check in soon for the whole series when it comes out. Wait, should I say Collector Hate? Okay, today we're reviewing Dial H. Oh. Find it. It's right here.
Let's call the hand.
Oh, this is a Collector Hate review.
Alright, good. Good.
Anyway, I'll cut that out too.
No, you won't.
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
I'll cut it out. Travis,
I
stop
hope so.
talking. Shh. That's the last thing I wanted to say. Okay. Wait, are we still recording? Am I expected to cut this?